Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing fantastic, Trevor. We're finally here.
Finally on Last Crusade, indeed. And Cameron Abbott, how you doing, Cam?
It belongs in a museum.
Belongs in a museum, indeed.
Classic.
Yes. After the lowest of lows last week with Temple of Doom, we are back up on the highs for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade this week, the last of the original Indiana Jones trilogy. As we continue our Indiana Jones month. And I believe we're doing this, I'm pretty sure I've seen, the buzz and reviews for Dial of Destiny start hitting today as we're recording this.
It's really weird because it came out at Cannes.
It was a Cannes, a while ago.
And there, it didn't get good review buzz. And it's coming out, now reviews are dropping, and it's getting, much better. So it's maybe just a thing of, maybe that's not the crowd for this kind of movie.
That's
it's
my
hard to say.
Yeah, that's my guess. Is Cannes isn't the audience I would think of for the critics that are going to Cannes aren't the big summer blockbuster critics.
Hard to get a good idea of what to kind of expect from a Dial of Destiny, but in some ways that's exciting.
Yeah. Our history lesson here, originally released May 24th, 1989, the first Indiana Jones I was alive for.
Woo!
Other releases of the time, we had Major League. The original Major League film had come out April 7th of that year. Say Anything with the iconic holding the boombox over the head, April 14th. The double-decker of Field of Dreams and Pet Cemetery, April 19th. Roadhouse, May 19th. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade here, May 24th, followed by Dead Poets Society in June 2nd, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, June 9th, Ghostbusters 2, June 16th, the 1989 Batman and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids opened both against each other on June 23rd, The Karate Kid Part 3, June 30th, Weekend at Bernie's, July 5th, Lethal Weapon 2, July 7th, and which Bond movie opened on July 14th?
License to Kill.
License to Kill, indeed.
We'll never forget our Tommy Dalton here, Trev. We love him.
Yeah, indeed.
I put it in the Slack chat too, and this seems as good as place as any to talk about it. 1989 might be the best year for movies. It's a wildly stacked year. It is running through because I went through the entire 1989. You're just what came out there, because I started looking at this list and I was like, Jesus Christ, it is a very heavy hitter year for movies.
You said that. I disagree. I think it has a few big notable things. I think one of the things we most frequently think about 1989 is because everybody refers to Batman as Batman 1989 or Batman 89 because there have been so many other Batman.
Sure.
So it's an easy point to Batman, but going back to obviously Indiana Jones wasn't the great hit, but there was a lot of other heavy hitters in 84. 85 obviously had a lot of great films. There are a lot of years where you're going to see a solid stack of things.
It's a solid stack. And also because there's so many both original brand new movies coming out, but also great things for series and the diversity, right? Get in Field of Dreams to Pet Cemetery to Say Anything to Major League to Roadhouse. And then for series, Last Crusade, Star Trek V, Ghostbusters 2, Karate Kid Part 3, Lethal Weapon, License to Kill. It's a great, I think, cross-section of a lot of pop culture properties. Because even in 85, which you talked about, which we did or it was technically 84 for Temple of Doom, but 85 was right around the corner. That's View to a Kill territory for Bond, so it's not as good of a Bond movie kind of thing. I think it's maybe Superman 3 time period, so not as good for that. 81, you're getting Fury's Only, which is not the best Bond movie. I like it more than you do, but still not great, right? you're getting no other superhero movie other than Superman 2, right? Like you're getting 81 is almost too early for like the 80s like classic series, and 84 is like either right as they're starting or like right before that still. And then like 89, you're in the full swing of like the late 80s to early 90s, like action movie swing. You're getting Field of like Dreams classics. And like, to be fair, like admittedly, a lot of this is also just like 1989 is a great year for our age group, I'll admit.
I was literally born.
But yeah, but like it is our age group. And so it was a great year. It's a lot of great movies.
So I Googled like, you know, best year in movies kind of thing. And one of the pages that came up is just like, it's showing how flawed it is. Cause like, you know, one of their years that they're highlighting is 1984, but one of the movies that they're including in the highlights for 1984 is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And it's like, nope, wrong Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
But they did call out that like Ghostbusters, Terminator, Nightmare on Elm Street, Beverly Hills Cop, Gremlins, that we talked, like a lot of the things we talked about in our last one. They don't have it, like, at least this, you know, rough shot example does not have 89 in their top 10. It looks like a lot of people point to like 1939 being very like pretentious film snobs of like the golden age of cinema. But anyway,
I think 89, I don't think it's on this list included, but 89, because I remember looking at the list later on of like movies came out the year. I think it's also Back to the Future.
Back to the Future Part 2, yeah.
Came out that year, right? Look Who's Talking's around this time period. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just like a great list, like a great fun year for movies.
Yeah. We'll segue into that because a couple of those do pop up in our highest grossing films. And the source I'm pulling this week is...
I love different source every time. Great.
So it's once again only going to be the worldwide gross. And this is per the like 1989 in film Wikipedia page, which is referencing and saying it gets these numbers from Box Office Mojo back in like 2020. But if you go to Box Office Mojo now for worldwide gross, wildly different, wildly lower numbers,
really?
and does not, or it pretty much has the same thing I've been running into the last few episodes of like the domestic and worldwide are both like the same and don't match up. But so I'm going off of what IMDb has. So where does everybody think Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade fell worldwide with a worldwide gross that year of $474.2 million, which is up from the maybe $179.8 million that we looked at last time.
Gangbusters.
That $474 million adjusted for inflation comes out to $1.162 billion. So probably the first of the franchise to crack that billion-dollar mark in the adjusted for inflation rankings.
So I have a slight shortcut because we did License to Kill, and we talked about the fact that was a like notoriously kind of box office disaster bomb movie, so much so that they like have never gone back to the summer again. So I know that License to Kill is not really a contender here because it just sort of got swamped by all of these other summer 80 movies. Like the three that I quickly look at, Cameron and think are the most likely are gonna be Last Crusade, Batman, maybe Ghostbusters 2. Right, that'd be the top three I would look at immediately and kind of think, yeah, that's likely.
All right, how about you, Cam? What do you think?
My question really comes down to: is it going to be bigger than Ghostbusters 2 and Lethal Weapon?
You don't think? Oh, I think it's easily bigger than Lethal Weapon 2.
No,
that's R-rated movie. That's an R-rated movie. They're not doing numbers like this, right? Like
no, Lethal Weapon's one of the best.
Yeah, but R-rated movies are they're like at such a different scale, because even like Deadpool
and Passion of the Christ were like notoriously like the first R-rated movies to like really do crazy numbers, and like and the Hangover movies and stuff like that. But yeah,
right. That's why I'm like, I think the scale is so much smaller with that Lethal Weapon 2.
Fair enough. I would probably put Last Crusade at number 2 behind Ghostbusters 2.
I'm going to say that I think it's also R.
I don't think Major League is anywhere near those ones. And like, I have the thing up here, but I'm like not looking at it right now. I'm just like that Like that is a movie that like played on Comedy Central a ton when I was growing
Yeah, I
up.
think that
but-
might have been a more of a VHS
Yeah.
hit.
I'm
I'm gonna say
saying-
I am gonna say Indiana Jones is number 2 under Ghostbusters 2. Oh wait, no, Batman
I'm
89. It's number 3.
Yeah.
You think it was number
I'm
3?
saying.
I think it's number 3.
Yeah.
Batman 89 did bonkers numbers.
I'm gonna say Last Crusade's number 1, Batman's 2, and then Trevor gave a weird answer for Back to the Future, but I'm gonna say Back to the Future is 3, Ghostbusters 4. That's my top 4.
All right.
I feel good about that.
Number 10, Born on the 4th of July with $162
What a great
million.
year for movies. That's what I'm saying.
This is a
guys.
great movie.
Number
Or-
9 with $215 million, Ghostbusters 2.
Oh,
Feel
wow.
good about not having it too high. Okay.
Number
That's my
8
number 4.
with $222.7 million, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
It's a great movie.
Number 7, $227 million, Lethal Weapon 2. Number
See? Okay, I feel good
number
about that.
6, a late year entry in November of this year, I believe, with $235 million, a timely entry because it was The Little Mermaid. And Disney's re-entry
What a good
into
year
the
for movies. Yeah.
box office blockbuster space.
Beginning of
the
the
beginning of the-
Renaissance.
I was gonna say, yeah. Wow, what a great year.
With about $500,000 more, also at $235 million, Dead Poets Society.
Great movie. Shout out to Dead Poets doing that well.
Yeah.
Man.
Number 4.
I mean, it was Robin Williams.
Number 4 with $297.999 million, so just under $298 million. Look Who's Talking. Coming out of nowhere.
The movie
there.
was great. Yeah.
Number 3 with $332.9 million. Back to the Future Part 2.
Nice. There's dead on the money on that.
Number 2 with $411 million. Batman.
Oh, no way.
And number 1
Look at
with
that.
$474.1 million. Indiana Jones and Last Crusade.
I'm gonna retire from that game right now. Get in the top 3 for 89. Right.
That's
I'll
great.
take that.
So I'm surprised Ghostbusters 2 did that poorly.
I mean, it like
It's really great. Right.
the original Ghostbusters like blew everybody away by how great
Right.
it did. And I mean, my understanding has historically been people just didn't connect with Ghostbusters 2
The second
as
one's
much.
not as good as the first one. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it also probably came out just in a more stacked time.
That's fair.
Right. It had been. It also, it's important to note too. It was a 5-year gap as well. So like time had definitely lapsed from the first and second one. And then yeah, like we said for a lot of these movies, like License to Kill, 89 is a stacked year to come out in, right? Like there's just way more competition too, right?
I mean, yeah, like going back to the releases of the time, Ghostbusters
Yeah.
came out a week later. Batman and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids came out. So
Yeah.
it suffered, what we see so many movies these days suffer of, like, it had its like, moment, opening, weekend at the box office, number 1, and then immediately is probably
So-
getting surpassed by the next thing. And then it just kind of has to like wane in on the rest of the summer box office to try and keep up. But yeah.
I also want to give a shout out to, since we're here and it's our podcast and I can do whatever I want. When Harry Met Sally also came out in 89, My Left Foot came out in 89, Glory came out in 89. Like it's just a crazy year for movies. And also the fact that I guess I predicted it, so I can't be too surprised. But the fact that Last Crusade did 60 some odd million better than Batman, it's almost like there's a reason that movie studios like sequels and all the name recognition that comes with it.
Indeed. Well, it's also, I mean, like, one of the reasons Batman 89 is so lauded is like it was a different kind of superhero movie. Like this, we had the Supermans leading up to this, but
it's basically almost like the third one ever, right?
Yeah, those had very much fallen off a cliff after like Superman 1 and 2, and so this being the Tim Burton darker, grittier take, especially when like Batman was known to the world at large more for the Adam West 60s series, which was obviously going to be running in super syndication by this point.
Yeah.
It was a new look for what a superhero movie could be. Much like we would, then get a number of years later with Batman Begins and then into the MCU as well. Little Mermaid came out November 17th of that year, and followed the following week by Back to the Future Part 2. So both of those
competition
were
everywhere.
Yeah, end of the year pushes. You mentioned Driving Miss Daisy. I think Driving Miss Daisy was, I guess, it probably was this year because it was like up for awards at the.
But it's not as good of a movie. That's why I didn't give it a shout out as much.
Yeah. But it was. I'm just seeing it was up for awards at like the 1990 Academy Awards and stuff. Obviously, because those always happen early in the year. All right. Has a runtime of 2 hours and 7 minutes. In the Lucasfilm timeline of things, where we last left off with Temple of Doom was 1984, and we had in 1985 Latino and Mishima: A Life in 4 Chapters. Followed by Labyrinth in 1986, and Howard the Duck in 1986, Willow in 1988, Tucker, The Man and His Dream, and The Land Before Time. I had not realized Lucasfilm had worked on The Land Before Time, also in 1988, collaborating with Don Bluth there. Then in 1989 here, alongside, we had Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, and then we start, like, this is the last of, like, Lucasfilm's like real heyday in terms of making their own movies. They very much like Radioland Murders is the next film that they produced in 1994, and then we get to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace in 1999. They very much kind of pivot from here on into being like the production house for and the effects house for studios more so than making their own films. Our roll call here, continuing on with Steven Spielberg, of course, as our director. We've talked about him many a times. Our writer, the screenplay for this one was written by Jeffrey Boehm, who was an uncredited screenwriter for the first Lethal Weapon movie. I don't know why necessarily he was uncredited on it, but he then wrote The Lost Boys, Last Crusade here, and then following Last Crusade, he is credited in the scripts for Lethal Weapon 2 and Lethal Weapon 3. George Lucas and Menno Meyjes were the story by credits on this one. Obviously, we've talked about Lucas many a time. Menno Meyjes was the story by on the Color Purple film, as well as Last Crusade, Twisted Obsession, and Ricochet. I don't know what those last two were, but they were basically their other major film credits. So I went ahead and threw them in here because that was pretty much it. It was like Color Purple and Last Crusade were the two that we recognized. Obviously, Harrison Ford returning once again as Indiana Jones. Sean Connery here as Professor Henry Jones, having been in stuff like Darby O'Gill and the Little People, which you can see in a very early That D Plus show that gets a big pop every St. Patrick's Day. But then, of course, he would go on to be best known for his work in the James Bond films, the early run there. Following that, he would go on to be in stuff like Highlander, The Hunt for Red October, Entrapment, Finding Forrester, You're the Man Now, Dog, and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, one of his last film roles. And then the For Russia with Love video game that Logan likes to point out was his video game credit.
I wasn't even going to shout out that. I was actually just going to shout out The Untouchables, which he won his Oscar for.
There
and
you go,
is absolutely fantastic in.
Yeah. Denholm Elliott makes his return as Marcus Brody in this one, with credits going back to 1947. In addition to this, he, of course, was in Raiders of the Lost Ark and Trading Places, as well as the film Room with a View. And then one of his last credits before passing, he had, I believe, one of the things in trivia I saw was basically right before this film, he had been diagnosed with AIDS and would go on to pass away from AIDS in 1992, 1993, somewhere in there. And his last film was Noises Off. Alison Doody as Elsa previously had been in A View to a Kill before going on to The Last Crusade.
Jenny Flex.
Yep, Jenny Flex in A View to a Kill. She was in, speaking of Major League, she was in Major League 2, and then popped up in RRR last year, which we all very much loved as evil British woman, imperialist.
Absolutely blows my mind every time I think about it.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah.
John Rhys Davies as Sala returning. He also has credits going back to 1964. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Victor Victoria, Indiana Jones, Last Crusade, And then, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, of course, he was in the Lord of the Rings films, and he will be popping up in the upcoming Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Also, shout out to his work in the hit television show Sliders.
Sure. Julian Glover here as Walter Donovan, with credits going back to 1959, including some early Doctor Who episodes. He was in The Empire Strikes Back as General Veers, I believe. He's basically in the AT-AT that is attacking Echo Base. He is like one of the like big franchise crossover people, because he is also in Bond in For Your Eyes Only as Christos, who I believe was like our weakest villain of our Bond villain rankings.
He's definitely up there, right? I mean, it's a classic Roger Moore one where like all the Roger Moore villains are not that great, but it's the two villains in one, and so like halfway through he becomes the actual villain. It's all bad. None of it's good.
It's kind of the same as this. He's like, oh, he starts out as like a good guy, and then it's like, oh no, he was a bad guy all along.
It's exactly the same premise.
Yep. Of course, here in Last Crusade, he's also in the classic comedy King Ralph. He is going back to another iconic franchise. He is Aragog, the giant spider in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. He was Grand Maester Pycelle in Game of Thrones.
Yep.
And he continues to work. He was in last year's Tar, which was a big awards contender, as well as he popped up in the short-lived and now defunct Willow series. So I like that was the thing that surprised me most, was that
Plus anymore, right?
He's still alive and working. Like because I think of him most recently as Grandmaster Pycelle, where he is old as fuck, and like that's the premise of his whole character. But he's also like sneakily spry. But that was also 10 years ago, so I was like, I definitely thought he would have passed by now. Speaking of, sadly, people who passed, River Phoenix as young Indy here had made his debut in the TV version of Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, which I did not know was a TV show until looking at IMDb here. I only knew it as the musical. But then he, of course, was in the iconic film Stand By Me. Speaking of Stephen King, as we referenced earlier, I think. The Mosquito Coast, Running on Empty. Here he is in Last Crusade, and then he would also appear in My Own Private Idaho before tragically passing way too young, and I think also 92, 93, somewhere in there. Michael Byrne here is Vogel, with credits going back to 1962. Last Crusade is probably one of his biggest. However, he was also in Braveheart, The Sum of All Fears, Gangs of New York, and he was old Gellert Grindelwald in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1.
I was trying to pinpoint who he was. Okay.
Yeah, so he
wow.
He like Johnny Depp and Mads Mikkelsen and Colin Farrell have all played Gellert Grindelwald.
The same character. Yeah.
Kevork Malikian plays Kazim, with credits going back to 1968. Prior to this, he had been in the film Midnight Express. After Last Crusade, he was also in the films Flight of the Phoenix and Exodus, Gods and Kings. Robert Edison as the Grail Knight. Not a ton of notable things, but he had credits going back to 1938. He passed away shortly after this film as well. He was very much in his later life. Richard Young credited as Fedora, the antagonist of young Indiana Jones, with credits going back to 1971, including Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. We joked about it last week that in 1984 we had Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. A fun little bonus trivia thing. Between the last movie and this movie, how many Friday the 13th movies do you guys think came out?
Ooh, that's a good. So 84 to 89. I'm gonna guess 4 feels like a lot, but
I'm gonna say 5.
I'm gonna say 3.
There were 3. There was Friday the 13th, The New Beginning, March of 1985. Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, August of 1986. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, May of 1988. And just outside of the window that I kind of alluded to earlier, I stopped with License to Kill in like mid-July. In July 28th of 1989, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan would come out.
Classic.
But yes, that means there were 3 movies.
I'll call that a tie. They're basically 4. Yeah, I'll give it this. Yeah. Jason Takes Manhattan. What a great. Yeah.
Although, so obviously, just a crazy flurry of Friday the 13th movies there in the 80s.
After the final one.
We've not gotten a new Friday the 13th since 2009. Part of this, I think, goes back to some of the legal issues that Cameron and I have discussed with the Friday the 13th game.
Yep. There's been a lot of controversy around copyrighted ownership of Friday the 13th, and it's been a long litigation matter.
Yeah. Anyway,
I understand that as a Bond fan. Legal shit will wrap you up.
Yeah, there you go. That was one of the items in the this year at the box office was License to Kill. Obviously, is the last Bond movie we get until GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Because of all the legal haranguing between people. So yeah, Richard Young here as Fedora. I just saw that and was like, aha, a new beginning already. Especially because I was like, wait, that came before Last Crusade? Okay, how many movies did we get before Last Crusade? And I was amazed that it was 3 in there in the 5-year gap between these two films. And then lastly, Paul Maxwell, credited as Panama Hat, the other antagonist of Indy's past here. He has credits going back to, I don't remember what year it was, but his credits included Pink Panther Strikes Again, A Bridge Too Far, Aliens, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now we move over to our trivia section, and specifically our alloutabubblegum.com body count breakdown. How many do we think is the total kill count of this film, gentlemen? I want to say last week in Temple of Doom it was like 33, I think was the total. We are up from that, so I will give you that as like a guidepost.
That's the least surprising thing I've heard this episode so far. I'm gonna go 71 overall.
71. How about you, Cam?
Number 1.
What do you mean number 1?
Sorry, what was that?
How many kills do you think?
Oh, shoot. Sorry, I thought you were asking
Cameron very clearly spaced out, not paying attention.
Sorry, you guys were talking about some stuff, and I'm tired. I'm sorry. How many kills? Oh, he got, let's see, 3 Nazis. If you count the ship.
I love that you're like trying to come up with like a real statistical number here.
All of the kills for the entire movie. We're not just doing Indy right now. We're doing everyone.
Oh, everyone? God.
Yeah. I said 71 if that helps you.
71. I'm probably going to go with 65.
Okay. The total kills counted here is 50 in this film.
Modest.
Yep, a round 50 with like an unconfirmed and uncounted of a few more, but these are the like notable. You can identify that that person's dead.
Not a lot of people actually died in the Nazi castle. It just hit me.
Yeah.
I thought people burned to death in the Nazi castle, but
that's true.
Did. Yep. So I have here in terms of the breakout of kills, Indiana Jones, Dr. Henry Jones, and I will just kind of say up front, Marcus Brody has 1 kill, and so the challenge there is, can you identify who Marcus Brody's 1 kill is? But first, Indiana Jones, of those 50 kills, and I will say in the mix here, realize like the past couple movies that like there might be like shared kills, so it's not like Indy killed 13 and Dr. Jones killed another 10 or something like that. There could be shared kills between the numbers there.
I think this is Indy's highest kill count, because he's got to have killed at like minimum 15. I'm gonna probably go round up and say actually 20. He's killed 20 people.
All right. And how about you, Logan?
It's interesting. I feel like he goes a long time without killing anyone, right? Because he doesn't kill anyone when he's a kid. He doesn't kill any of the people on board the ship. That ship, like the fucking thing, like knocks off in the wave.
If we're not counting the ship, then I think he only killed maybe
Yeah, because he
14
doesn't
people.
kill the ship. Like the thing like falls off and it blows up itself. It doesn't. He doesn't kill them. Right.
I'm gonna go ahead and give you the clue that you should count the ship.
I'm not counting the ship. That's a crazy. That's a crazy.
Actually,
thing. The ship.
Actually,
the
no.
thing-
Never mind.
Yeah, it breaks
Never mind, my
off in the
apologies.
wave. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, no. The ship explodes, killing Panama Hat and 5 thugs on board, but they are not credited to Indy.
Yeah.
Then I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and change mine to 14.
I'm gonna say Indy overall kills. 14 sounds pretty good too. But I feel like he actually has a pretty low body count. I'm gonna say Indy's got 11 kills.
All right. Couple things. First, one, Cameron, you said you think this is a record high, and you said 20, and he killed 21 people in the last movie.
That's right. Because of the bridge. I forgot about the bridge.
So, but yes, I actually gave the game away because he killed 13, as I said in my example.
What did we say? 11 and 14? Yeah, pretty good.
We'll go through those in a moment. How many for Dr. Henry Jones?
He kills the guy in the plane with the seagulls scaring them, right? I would count that as a kill for him.
Definitely.
And then he, like, maybe, I'm trying to think, the guy in the tank that shoots the other driver when it ricochets, he's like fighting for the pistol, I think, right? So like you could argue maybe that's one for him. That's kind of a possible one. And then outside of that, he doesn't kill anyone in the castle. He doesn't kill anyone at the Holy Grail Temple. I'll say Henry Jones Sr. gets 2 kills.
Cameron? Always got to remember, we're doing an audio podcast.
Yeah, sorry about that. Nope.
Lots of dead air.
I was gonna say
never
something,
great.
and then I caught myself, and I was like, but I think I'm 1. I think it only counts as 1.
You think he only killed 1?
The plane guy. I don't think that the other 2 that I'm thinking of count as kills.
So what you both appear to be forgetting is Henry blows up a truck containing 11 German soldiers.
Oh shoot, you're right.
Using
oh my
the tank's
gosh.
side gun.
That's right. He just flat out like pulls the trigger and blows up a whole truck of dudes. You're right. Holy shit.
Yep. So he had 12 kills altogether. Those 11 and the 12th being using his flock of seagulls maneuver. And then,
is that right? I guess it swings in. Yeah, it swings in.
Because I was like, he didn't actually successfully kill anybody inside the tank, but I forgot about outside the tank.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Marcus Brody. Who is our 1 kill from Marcus Brody?
Maybe it's Brody who kills the guy in the tank. That's what I'm wondering.
I think Brody killed the guy in the tank. I think you're right.
Because where else is Brody going to get a kill, right? I would say. So I think it's the tank guy.
Yes. Marcus Brody knocks out one of the German soldiers in the tank, who then dies when the tank goes over the cliff. That kill is attributed to Marcus, maybe also shared by Indy. So the rest of our breakdown, back off the Portuguese coast, we had 6 total kills. Indy kicks 1 thug off the Coronado, and then the Coronado explodes. Venice has 3 recorded kills. 3 cruciform sword members are killed when their speedboat is crushed between the 2 ships and explodes.
Hell yeah.
At Castle Brunwald, we get 3 more kills, with Indy shooting 2 German soldiers and 1 officer. During the escape, Indy, there are 4 kills. Indy knocks 1 German rider off his motorcycle with a flagpole, killing him from the impact.
Oh, that was such a sick kill, too. That thing really blew up for a flagpole.
Yes. Indy jams the part of the flagpole into another rider's motorcycle, causing it to explode, flip over, and kill him.
That's what I was actually thinking.
That's another Mythbusters one, too, that did a whole thing about that.
Yeah. The German fighter pilot is blown up trying to fly through a low tunnel. We get that little comedic gag moment. And then Henry kills with the flock of seagulls, hitting the other German fighter plane, causing him to lose control and crash.
I prefer to be the one that died in the tunnel compared to the Seagulls one. That Seagulls one looked horrific.
Yeah, it was awful.
I mean, neither of them are good. Like the tunnel one, he goes through the entire tunnel and then explodes after the fact.
Yeah, but he didn't have his have seagulls burst through his window and like
Yeah,
peck at
it's
him
pretty
and, like,
horrible.
Sure.
like covered in bird blood and everything on their way out.
During the convoy attack, we have German soldiers blowing up 4 cruciform sword members with grenades, and then they kill another 4, shooting them alongside Kazim. In the tank chase proper, we get 21 kills, the bulk of this film. The tank blasts a car stuck on its turret, killing the driver. Indy jams the tank's side gun with a rock, causing the Hatay gunner to be killed by the backblast when he fires. Indy then fires through 3 German soldiers with a single bullet.
Amazing
which is
scene,
wild. The way that he like stops and like looks at the gun, it's so great. I loved it.
Indy punches 1 German soldier onto the tank treads, causing him to be run over, knocks out another German soldier by kicking the tank periscope and hitting him in the back of the head. That soldier is going to be killed when the tank drives off the cliff. Henry blows up the truck containing 11 German soldiers using the tank's side gun, as mentioned earlier. Marcus knocks out 1 German soldier, who dies then when the tank goes off the cliff. The knocked out soldier accidentally fires a bullet that ricochets and hits the Hatay tank driver. And Indy knocks out Vogel and lets him die in the tank crash. And then finally, He Chose Poorly sees 4 dead at the final temple there. 1 dead Hatay soldier is seen having failed to be a penitent man.
And then 2 others,
jump.
right?
Then another one is decapitated. We watch that one walk in and die. Then Donovan unintentionally drinks from the wrong grail, ages rapidly before crumbling into dust, and Elsa falls down a hole while trying to reach for the grail. So there are our 4 deaths, or our 50 deaths and kills and whatnot throughout the film.
Hells yeah.
Some other trivia for you. As with other Indiana Jones movies, Harrison Ford did many of his own stunts. According to stuntman Vic Armstrong, he had to pull Ford aside and ask him to let him do some work because Ford was doing so much of the action himself. Armstrong later said, he wasn't such a great actor. He would have made a really great stuntman.
I think you see that in this movie as well. Like,
Yes.
They are able to really showcase, using really great wide shots, a lot of the stunt work. In particular, obviously, when Indy's like holding the guy to like the spinning blades destroying the ship, they're both very clearly actually there. It's great. And then obviously Harrison Ford like hanging on to like his like little backpack as he's just getting fucking beat to shit by the rocks is also really great.
I don't think I included it here, but one of the trivias mentioned on that scene of him like dangling from the tank gun is obviously he's doing it himself, and the crew is basically like standing above, and like there were a bunch of crew members basically just like pelting him with dust and stuff to give the effect of the walls crumbling around him.
Ooh, also shout out to his horseman work.
Yeah.
His equine work was fantastic.
Really great.
The fact that you could clearly
actually
see it was Harrison the entire time. He's doing a lot of that equine work, including the jump. The jump is not him?
Off of the horse onto the tank is the stuntman, is Vic Armstrong. That was another one of the trivia things.
Oh, yeah. But the ride up the ramp though is
that's all Harrison. You can
Harrison.
see it.
Okay, that's where I was like, I can't believe he did all of that.
Yeah.
It makes sense why you wouldn't let Harrison Ford do that one.
Yeah. That one might actually kill you.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford nominated River Phoenix to play him as a teenager, having worked with him on the Mosquito Coast. When describing how he prepared for the role, Phoenix explained that he didn't really base his portrayal on the Indiana Jones character, but instead on Harrison Ford, so he observed Ford out of character before acting his part. Harrison Ford cut his chin in a car accident in Southern California when he was about 20 years old, so this movie explains that cutaway by having a young Indiana Jones cutting his chin on the whip.
Which is great.
Also introduces the whip to Indy as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Like one of my key notes of this movie is that the opening sequence of this movie does Solo infinitely better than Solo, a Star Wars movie.
It's so good.
2,000 rats were bred for the production. Breeding them specially was necessary, as ordinary rats would have been riddled with disease. For the scene at the Nazi rally in Berlin, where Indiana Jones confronts Elsa and steals back the diary, Steven Spielberg had all the extras who did the Nazi salute simultaneously put their other arms behind their backs and cross their fingers. Indiana Jones' birth name is finally revealed in this movie, Henry Jones Jr. For the 3 movies, he had been addressed as Indiana or Indy, with the name Indiana coming from the dog, in this movie and real life. George Lucas's Alaskan Malamute, who lived in the 1970s. A dog of this breed is seen in this movie when young Indy returns home with the cross in hand. Sir Sean Connery was always Spielberg's first choice to play Indiana Jones' father, as an inside joke to say, as we've discussed on this show before, that James Bond is the father of Indiana Jones. If that had failed, Gregory Peck and John Pertwee were backup choices for the role. Spielberg had always wanted to do a Bond movie, but did Indiana Jones as a James Bond type character. Laurence Olivier, who would pass away later this year in 1989, was briefly considered to play the Grail Knight, but he was too ill to commit to the role and died shortly after the movie's release. And then lastly, we talked about him a little bit in previous trivia sequences, but Harrison Ford and Pat Roach, who played the Gestapo in this, are the only actors to appear in the first 3 Indiana Jones movies. Roach played the giant Sherpa and the first mechanic in Lost Ark, and the chief guard in Temple of Doom. And there was an extended scene here where Indiana Jones knocked his Gestapo character in this unconscious aboard the Zeppelin, extending the running joke of Indy always taking out Pat Roach's characters in every movie. However, the scene was not used in the final cut, so the only presence remaining of Roach in this film is a shot of him running behind Vogel as they run towards the Zeppelin before the iconic no-ticket scene.
So good.
And unfortunately, this would be the last movie in the franchise with Roach, who passed away in 2004. But just wanted to give a little shout out that I thought it would have been it's a fun running gag. A little distasteful with him appearing effectively in brownface in the last movie, but yeah. And I guess also if he's in there as a Sherpa in the first movie, also in brownface. Man, the 80s were a bad time.
Yep.
So that's it for the trivia. Let's dive into what we think about this movie. Logan, I will kick it to you first. I know this is your favorite of the series, so expound upon that.
Yeah, I think, so...
Shockingly, bringing James Bond into this movie works for Logan.
Really pays dividends. Yeah, I mean, Last Crusade is my favorite of the Indiana Jones series. It's sort of so much of my love of the series comes from this movie. It is one of my very, very, very favorite movies of all time. I think to me, it is so perfectly Indiana Jones, right? I think it marries a lot of the best elements from the prior 2 films and sort of makes them work while injecting new things into it, right? It takes the globe-trotting adventure film and this sense of action and wonder and kind of, I think, this idea of like belief that the first one introduces and mixes it with the sense of like scale and kind of, I think, mysticism of Temple of Doom, and combines something that neither of the other 2 movies really had anywhere close to this degree, which is a sense of fun and levity and humor and emotion, I would even say, that carries The Last Crusade forward so well, right? Like, I think it's pretty easily the funniest of the Indiana Jones movies. I think it's pretty easily the most emotional of the movies. It wears its heart kind of unabashedly on its sleeve, and I really love that. I think that the on-screen pairing of Sean Connery and Harrison Ford as father and son is probably the best father-son relationship in any movie that I've seen. I think it's played so well for what they're trying to do. It's pitch perfect. It is dramatic. It's funny. It's tense. It is fraught in all the ways you'd want this relationship to be kind of frayed at the edges. And in a movie that is so kind of rip-roaring, action-adventure-esque, you still get these really quiet moments of Indy, kind of confronting his dad, and his dad kind of saying, "I'm here. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to say?" Right? That like immediately puts you in the shoes of like a teenager who's frustrated with his dad kind of thing, right? And you just kind of say nothing. There's nothing I want to talk to you about, right? I think it does a like femme fatale villain better than almost any other movie, right? I think that Elsa is such a great kind of complicated villain, right? Because she sort of flirts the line, because she is a Nazi, I guess, technically, right?
100%.
But also like very much isn't a Nazi at the same time, right? Like she's a Nazi with a brain. She's a Nazi who like understands the horrors of what the Nazis are doing, but sort of doesn't care because it's a means to an end. And is just so carried away by her ambition that she can't help herself, but like has that like spark of like, oh, like in another life she could be good probably. And I find her dynamic with Harrison Ford to be really good. I really like their chemistry together, and her chemistry with Sean Connery, I guess. And yeah, like I think they play it so well. It's so good to get Brody and Sala back. I think Donovan's a great villain. I think Vogel is such a great like mustache twirling villain. Yeah, like I think all of the beats just sort of combine together to make Last Crusade such a like singularly special movie that I think builds off what came before it. And I also think, you know, watching it again now, this most recent viewing, the two big takeaways I had as well, that I'll talk about now anyway, were that this to me is the Indiana Jones adventure that most inspired Uncharted, I feel like. And the type of stories they're telling, the type of, I think, themes they're pursuing, dynamics they're kind of going after. The Sully and Drake relationship is right here. But not just that, like the sense of like, this is by far the most globe-trotting of the Indiana Jones adventures, right? Even going forward to like Kingdom of Crystal Skull, like this is the only way they bounce around the most places. That's very Uncharted. And this is also the Indiana Jones movie, I think, that I see a lot of homages to, again, for obvious reasons, to James Bond, but done in like really clever, subtle ways, right? Like the boat chase is very similar to the boat chase from Russia with Love, right? For example, which Sean Connery obviously was in. The plane chase where they are like starting there and then go to the ground is very similar to a helicopter on the ground chase that they have in From Russia with Love, right? Like they're pulling a lot of elements from that movie, and it's really kind of cool. Like I think you kind of get to see in this movie both what inspired Indiana Jones and then also what is going to be inspired by Indiana Jones and Uncharted. And it's kind of cool to see the evolution of these kind of stories through the years with Last Crusade in particular.
Yeah, there was one trivia thing, speaking on one of those items. This movie has the most chase sequences of Indiana Jones, with 6 different types of chases: foot, train, boat, motorcycle, plane, and car. And this is also the only movie in the franchise to have a boat chase or a train chase.
You know what I will say to this, though, to me and Trevor, who did that Bond show for Quantum of Solace. Quantum of Solace also had all of those chases, and yet none of them were good. You couldn't understand what was happening in any of them because of the cut. So this is how you do 6 chase sequences very, very well.
Yeah. I think actually, I don't think Quantum of Solace had the train chase. I think it had
you're right.
everything
it had
else.
Everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and on another one of the points that you brought up, I really just want to touch before, and then I'll throw it to you, Cam, for your general thoughts. And I don't know, like, I guess I'll ask the question to you, but in my interpretation this time around, it was the first time I've ever read the interpretation that Elsa knows she's giving Donovan a fake grail at the end.
Oh yeah,
I also
sure.
felt that.
Oh yeah,
for
for
the first
sure.
time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh no, I'd always interpreted that with her like this. I think that's always
that was the first time, because she has like a line right after, like, of course it wouldn't be gold.
Right.
Yep.
That like
even her like facial reaction to me like gives away so much of like what her kind of game plan is when
And
she's like kind of glancing at Indy.
And I also felt like this is the first time Donovan realizes that she tricked him, and that's why he goes to strangle her while he's dying. I thought that's when I was like, oh, that's a very different interpretation of when the last time I watched this movie was. Like,
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, for me, this tiny scene on that sequence that I feel like I noticed for the first time that really picked up on is that the fact that like when he disintegrates into dust, the only thing that's left is just a little like Nazi symbol. It'll be like he is a Nazi ultimately. Like he tried to hide it better than everyone else, but the guy's a Nazi.
Cameron, I'll throw it to you for your general thoughts on the film.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I think my most general thoughts are this is my favorite Indiana Jones movie.
Hell yeah, Cameron.
It is by far.
I wasn't sure about you. Okay.
I think that there's just so much this film does, whether it's the flashback, doing a little
we didn't
solo
even talk about
like
that, yeah.
sequence where we get the origin of just about everything. But I think my favorite thing about it is adventure is second to the actual antiquities, the actual history. When it comes down to it, Indy is never interested in these artifacts or these things based off of the power that they can give him. It's always about the purpose of these items and the idea of if this doesn't belong to anybody, then it belongs in a museum. It doesn't belong to private collectors. I think that there's an interesting moment where also shout out to this is the first time I also picked up. I was like, oh, Donovan straight up is just like a stand-in for like, Ford and a lot of these other like Americans that were happy to do business with Nazis. But there is something that I really enjoy about the idea that Indy is from Indiana is so self-reliant and so individually focused on himself and his pursuits because he gets it from his dad. It's the first time I think I've seen this since I was an actual proper adult. I watched this movie a bunch when I was a kid growing up. But this is the first time I think I've seen it in maybe 15, 20 years. 15 years? 15 years. Because I'm not in my 40s. So, but I haven't seen this movie since I was a teenager. I watched them before I watched all of them before I went to, before I saw Crystal Skull. I love this movie so much because it brings up the dichotomy of what it means for, like, when finally Sean Connery says, fine, like, let's talk. And he's like, I've been waiting for this moment my entire life. Harrison Ford just does such an amazing delivery of, I've been waiting for this moment my entire life, and I can't think of anything. Like, it's there's so much fulfillment in this movie, and also so many things that fall flat. I think one thing that I will say, Elsa is, at the end of the day, a Nazi. I think that at the end of the day, she'll always put whatever gets her to her goal first. And even if that means burning books, even like Indiana's rage at her at the book burning is so
great. Yeah.
And so real. For somebody who believes in the preservation of antiquities and history, to have believed that she was as well, and then find this massive betrayal as she's just hanging out at a book burning with Adolf Hitler. Also shout out to like Dr. Jones, or not Dr. They're both Dr. Jones. But shout out to Daddy Jones and his just absolute hatred for Nazis. Just like
oh my god, I wrote down a couple of his lines that are so good. Yeah,
the way he basically called them everything they called non-Aryans, like, to their face, and he was just like so such good. The way that they treat history, the way that it shows also where like Indy's indignation comes from. Indy literally chased the cross of Coronado for decades to get it back and have it put in a museum as a sort of like revenge on this douchebag who bribed authorities and like all sorts of stuff. But I will give a shout out to whoever played the fedora guy.
He's so good.
At the beginning of the film, I loved his absolute begrudging respect for this young kid he straight up tells him, he goes, you might not have won today, but you don't have to like it. And I'm like, that's like, weirdly enough, a more fatherly moment than Indiana Jones has with this total stranger who gives him his fedora hat than he has with his father probably for most of his life. Like, it's such a wild thing to consider, like, that this guy is like the actual like inspiration for Indiana Jones.
Yeah, obviously, like, everything about that guy is, oh, that's who Indy becomes. Like, this is very clearly a pivotal moment in young Indiana Jones' life that, like, is going to define the next 40 some odd years.
Straight up shows us why he's afraid of snakes, which honestly, if I had gone through that, I'd be deathly afraid of snakes as well.
And it does a great job of setting up that, like, beginning of this movie, he's not. He just grabs the snake off his, scout friend's pants. It's just a snake. And so it is a fun, like, subversion to give you these origin moments and all that stuff.
And it's super traumatic. Also, he gets the whips himself in the face at first and then gets used to it. And then, like, there's so many great setups just in the first part of this movie. and then it follows through, I think, flawlessly. I think this movie just does such an amazing job of, it does take you beat to beat to beat to beat so quickly, but when I look back at this movie, I don't see holes, I don't see flaws. I see things that, like, Indy didn't pick up. I see several different points, like, oh, Indy's dad couldn't have gone through the tunnels below and everything and getting under there because the path would have been open. And clearly, like, they kidnapped him at the library. Like, the way that you kind of can backwards kind of trajectory like, what happened to Indiana's dad up until he gets taken to the castle in Austria is phenomenal. I just love this movie backwards and forwards. It works so well. And then on top of that, you have just this, we don't have, like, a weird, jaded, I don't believe in the superstitious stuff. I will say massive shout out to his quote at the beginning where he says, archaeology is about fact. If you're looking for truth, so-and-so's down the hall teaching philosophy. Like, we're talking about facts, hard facts. So your idea about what is the truth, what is the philosophy of the idea of the Holy Grail, that's not what this movie is about. But in a way, it actually is. Because it's about, what did you find, like, what did you get out of all this, Dad? Illumination. And it's like, there's lessons that are learned when Indy goes off with the tank at the end of that chase scene, of his dad realizing nothing was worth more than his son's life. And that is the turnaround that he has when he is like, I taught you self-reliance, and like Indiana, like, that's such a sad scene at the dinner table on the Nazi blimp. Mm-hmm. Because it's such a, like, you fully understand that Indy chose first off the name Indiana because the dog meant more to, like, he had more interactions with the dog than his own father. Also, his dad being an absolute dick, being like, count to 20, in Greek. Mm-hmm. Like, what an absolute, and like Indy then walking away and closing the door, like, is such a, like, okay, my dad's not actually, like, I literally have a priceless treasure in my hand. His dad could not care less. And by the way that tracks throughout the movie as he's on his adventure and he's doing these amazing things, and he looks back at his dad and his dad's just, like, not impressed. And it's like, there's so many great moments that I think that this movie carries over so well. And just also shout out to Hitler being so full of himself that he thinks this literally has the legendary like Grail diary in his hand and just signs it without even looking at it. And it's like,
one of the best parts of the entire movie.
It's so good. It's so good. Shout out. It's like very similar to the Nazi monkey in Raiders, of like what an iconic scene of just like, you just don't expect it.
Go ahead, Logan.
I was just going to say I think the Nazi rally is like a really well crafted scene for that exact reason. And also just in terms of like how ultimately stupid the Nazis are and how ultimately stupid Hitler is. Like he has just like everything he wants, he has in his hands and just gives it away. Right. Like that's he has it all right there. And he's so oblivious. He's so full of himself. And they're all so kind of high on their own supply that they can't even get it. Right. And I think it also, what it does in terms of like, it is one of the very rare moments where I think you see Indiana with like a very real, visceral, palpable like fury to him. Like he's like willing to like just straight up snap Elsa's neck. Like he's got it and will just kill her because you can almost like feel his fury at both like her and like the danger she put his dad in and the betrayal she had for him, but also like him seeing what is literally his life's work just kind of burning all around him. Right. And like, I think it's such a great scene.
Yeah. A couple things. Timeline-wise, movie is set in 1938. So we are a year before the official start of World War II, and then obviously also the U.S. doesn't join World War II until 41. So like the Donovan as a stand-in for Ford stuff, sure, yeah, but it's also like, like we weren't at war with them yet. So I can get why, guy trying to make money where he can, all that stuff. But obviously he's also just a despicable dude. But yeah, I think for a lot of the things you guys have touched on, this is my favorite of the series too. Unsurprisingly,
yeah. All right.
When we get to our rankings and stuff, like it's like again, this and Raiders are the good ones. Temple of Doom last week, a very bad one. we'll see if like time has
I'm
been
very excited
kind
for next
on
week. Right.
on the next one, especially because I saw somebody tweet out the other day that was basically like the next one will trade in like the pulpy 30s and 40s for like the B movie sci-fi stuff of the 50s and 60s. And I haven't looked at it through that lens. I always look at the next one as just like they just like everything that was like practical and fun about the first ones is bad CG,
which is still true.
starting
to a certain
from
extent,
like
right,
the opening, prairie dog
for it.
sequence
Yeah.
and stuff like that in the next one. And obviously we'll have plenty to talk about next week. But yeah, this one, a ton of fun. And it is a refreshing like return to form because it's this obviously it like not only thematically with the like religious iconography of this one compared to Raiders of the Lost Ark, but just the like so we go back to so many things of Raiders. Obviously the Indy versus Nazis stuff. The action is a lot more fun. The globetrottingness of that one, the much more interesting and compelling dynamic with the female character, as well as like the great fun dynamic with Sean Connery in there as Indy's father. Does it allows Indy to show more dimensions than we got. We got, a little bit of like him as a parent kind of thing with the short round stuff. But here we get to see him as like the son who's always been seeking for his father's approval and never got it.
Right.
Which is especially in the 80s and, the eras that, it's a very common kind of like trope and sensation that is relatable to far too many people. And that like, so yeah, the like toxic masculinity of Henry Jones Sr., even if it's not in like I'm a big burly man, it is a like the refusal to share feelings and stuff like that until maybe it's too late is touched on there. And as we've been talking about it, I'm thinking about this line in Spider-Verse where across the Spider-Verse where Spider-Man says to Officer Davis, like, well, men of your age, like, don't take care of their mental health well, as just a fun like reference to those kinds of sentiments. The opening sequence here and the mini adventure that we get at the beginning of the film to give us everything that sets up Indiana Jones, as I said, is a better, like, it does all of the things that Solo tried to do and failed miserably at, but in like a 15-minute sequence.
It's so good too.
And is fun throughout. It, like, you didn't have necessarily questions on any of those things, but the fact that it decides to give you like those origin beats in fun and interesting and compelling ways, most notably for me with the like, oh, he wasn't always afraid of snakes. Here's the traumatic experience that makes him very deathly afraid of snakes throughout everything else. Is just a ton of fun. And the fact that it picks up with like basically a match cut of, okay, let's close the loop on that, like this prologue with another indie adventure. You're never going to see how he got to this, how he tracked this person down. He's just clearly been on this trail for many, many years, finally found the guy wearing the same suit and red Pont Blanc as he did many, many years ago.
Man, when you got a look, you own that look forever, man.
Yeah, I tell you what,
nobody ever changes their style.
We're gonna call you Panama Hat, and that is your entire identity. Also, another thing in the trivia, in an earlier version of the script, apparently Fedora was Abner Ravenwood. Was that was going to be the idea, was that he was Miriam's father, and this would help factor in the ultimate like relationship that they have. They ultimately don't end up going that way, but that is another fun little like what if they had in the
that is pretty cool
of Indy. And then just the fun setup of the adventure. A lot of it is, a lot of similar kind of like setup work to Raiders. We go off to Venice. like the great sequence, obviously we're back in the classroom. We get the line like, and X never ever marks the spot.
Marks the spot.
Followed, 15 minutes later by X marks the spot, quite literally. I chuckled to myself this time around that like Indy happened to break the floor in the exact right spot for that little hole underneath the mosaic that he and Elsa stepped down into. Also, Indy's really fucking dumb of like, petroleum, let's immediately light a giant torch that could, easily turn this all sideways. But yeah, his joy and excitement at doing the like classroom
like a
stuff,
schoolboy,
like the etching, doing all that stuff.
God, it's so good.
There is just a ton of fun to that, and yeah, the ultimate like reveal that Elsa was a bad guy all along. Very fun. I remember like that being a very fun twist. The first time watching this many years ago.
When Henry is just like, don't trust her.
She's a Nazi.
She's a Nazi.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? She goes, Indy, help me. He goes, fine. And he's like
my favorite thing of that is Sean Connery just being like, kill her, do it.
Yeah,
he's always like, I dare you to. Yeah, kill her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he's like, she's a fucking Nazi, Indy, and Indy just can't get it. It's such a great scene too.
And he never gets it until the very end when she chooses the Grail over her own life. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's why you don't fall in love with Nazis.
Sure.
One of many reasons.
That's the one reason.
Many reasons.
Because they're going to pick the Holy Grail over you. And the payoff later to like, how did you know? She talks she speaks German in her sleep, being a further payoff and for the like weird. Both of them have had the same woman kind of thing.
Eskimo brothers, the weird Eskimo brothers moment.
And on that, another trivia thing. There's only a 12-year difference between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery, and so a lot of the production went into make sure Sean Connery always has like the gray and the white beard, is always wearing glasses, and Indiana Jones is always clean shaven, and like basically trying to make Harrison Ford look as young as possible and Sean Connery look as old as possible for the sake of the father-son dynamic.
Give him a grandpa hat on his head the entire movie. Yep. Yeah, it's great.
Yep. Throw him in all sorts of tweed.
Oh man. Although shout out to like the fact that his dad, whenever Indy is being professional, he always dresses like his dad. The tweed suit and everything. That's Henry's entire ensemble.
Yeah, I mean that is the subtlety that we get in it. Like obviously we get the very overt. He's clear like the Indiana Jones we all think of is him being and emulating the fedora guy. But then the Indy that is Professor Jones back at the academy is that.
It's so good.
Also, shout out to him being like, all right, my office hours are here. And then everybody wants to be at his office hours and he bails the fuck out.
Yeah, he's like,
he just ditches.
He can't focus on the work because they are all just like, Dr. Jones,
he's somehow the rock star teacher.
And he's just like, I hate this so much, walks home and then is ambushed by secret Nazis.
I love that whole school sequence because it sort of showcases the downside to going on these trips and visits, right? Because the secretary says like you've got like a fuck ton of mail, you've got like 8 appointments backed up, because like it very clearly shows that like he's someone who, when he does find something to go after, kind of has this like zeal that he has to immediately chase after, right? So he kind of like pushes everything back, and then he gets back in like the real world, and it's like, oh my god, like if I'm not in the classroom or in the archaeological site, all of the bureaucratic shit, like he like clearly has no time for. And like I love the fact that like, this movie more than any of the other ones, I think really humanizes who Indiana Jones is, right? And grounds him in a way that the other ones don't. Like in Raiders, we get to see like he's a professor and also this, and like you see that dichotomy. In Temple of Doom, he's just an action hero. He's like nothing else. He's not any sort of three-dimensional figure. And then Crystal Skull is its own bag of worms. But here, like, not just in terms of like, the complications of being an adventurer and a professor, but also like his dad, like Cameron said, not getting excited makes you as an audience member be like, oh, like, yeah, like I view Indiana Jones as like this great action hero movie star. That's what I see of his life. But his dad is so not impressed. It almost like kind of helps pull him back down to earth for you as a viewer too, right? And it's this really great like series of scenes of being like Indiana Jones is a person, right? And like it's a great, I think, usage of a like flashback or like a prologue that services this idea of like, here we are showing Indy become an Indy and showing that he is just a boy, right? He is just like a person, and like here, so he became this person. And unlike Solo, it's not done in a way of like, I think, sort of ruin in the final package. It sort of, you see who he was, you see the fact that he is a person, and it sort of strengthens Indiana Jones as like this like hero instead of diminishing it, right? And I think throughout Last Crusade, they just sort of emphasize the fact that he is a person, he is flawed, he can't see this girl's a Nazi, he can't handle all the kind of side work of being a professor, all the way through to the very end, in one of my very favorite moments of the entire series, which is, him holding Elsa and saying, let it go, give me the other hand. She doesn't. The rocks immediately fall, and he's in the exact same situation as her now, and he immediately falls prey to the same temptation of like, I can grab it, right? And his dad to say like, Indiana, right? And it's the first time he uses his name like that, like, and it's his dad, the guy who's given his entire life to this pursuit, and for him to say let it go is what snaps Indiana back to reality and kind of is able to pull him up, right? Like Indiana is flawed, he does feel these same temptations, he can usually just sort of not let them affect him the same way. And for here you kind of see that moment of like the literally exact same situation that he was in 10 seconds earlier with Elsa, he's not falling victim to the same way. Like I think it's such a powerful, beautiful moment of him and his dad, and showing Indy as fallible, but also, George Lucas, spoiler, loves father-dad stuff. And like, again, like Luke and Vader, who, Vader ultimately redeems or is redeemed by Luke, right? And that relationship kind of redeems him. Like Henry Sr. and Jr. sort of redeem each other throughout this movie. And I love that moment of like Henry Sr. kind of saving Jr. and this last second kind of thing. And I think it's beautiful. I think how they humanized Indiana is so great. Like, we could do an entire podcast just in the opening prologue. I think it's my favorite opening title of the series. As good as Raiders is, this one is so great. And that 1-2 punch of like the flashback fading into the like present day stuff for 1938 it's so good, right? And I think throughout this, like, I talked a little bit how in Raiders you're getting a Lucas and Spielberg who are like just exploding, right? Like right as like they're really hitting like mega super uber stardom, right? And I think here, 8 years later at the end of the decade, both of them I think are more refined storytellers. Both of them I think are more refined at their craft. That there are a bunch of small, tiny touches and subtleties that they like lace throughout this. And I think they're also both more comfortable addressing these more mature themes in a way that isn't just like, we're both going through divorces, fuck women of Temple of Doom, and can kind of handle it with like a more like level-headed approach and touch, and they're not as angry, and I think they've just kind of aged and matured themselves, and I think that's reflected in the story. And I think it comes across so many different ways in Last Crusade.
Indeed. Any final thoughts or other favorite moments anybody wants to shout out before we start diving into the end game of our segments?
One of my absolute favorite moments is when Indiana Jones bluffs up Brody.
Yes.
Says he's he knows 12 different languages. He knows the customs of every village. Like he'll be welcome. He'll blend in without any issue whatsoever.
He could very well have the Grail right now, right?
Yeah. And then it just shows him, cuts to him, just like, excuse me, can somebody speak English or Greek, or ancient Greek rather? And it's just like such a
so good,
wonderful thing. And then later, Indy's like, Brody, he goes, Brody, like he got lost in his own museum once, like
right after or right before we watched it, I saw somebody like there was a retweet going around that was basically like, this is one of the best cuts in all of Spielberg, and it was that moment of like bigging up Brody and cutting to Brody just being completely incompetent. The 1-2 punch of that for me is Sala immediately clocking the Nazi
I'm so good.
and saying like, "Oh, paper, yes, here's the paper. Like I just read it. Run," and having that, and Brody just completely being oblivious. Run, and then finally him just punching the guy in the face.
So good.
I also like the fact that whole sequence ends with like the reverse of Raiders of like them getting put, and it's like the Nazi truck this time, right? And like that gets taken away, and it's such a great reverse of like.
And he tells him, "Go find the back door. Go out
Yeah.
the back door." And there's no back door.
Yeah.
It's a truck.
Well, it's him going up into the disguised like. You think it's like a marketplace kind of thing. He runs up in there, and then like the Nazis immediately like, "Yep, nope, it was a truck." and Sala's just left there like,
that is probably the one plot hole, because that makes no goddamn sense why they would do that.
I mean,
It's so good though.
It's I don't know if it's a plot hole so much as like, oh, that's convenient that like they had that truck ready to
They
go,
learned,
but
right?
but
They
it's
were- they
also
remembered
Like
from
disguised
Raiders 2
as a
this
shop
happened to
front.
them.
So curious.
I mean, my reading of it is that was always where they were going to try and like guide him to anyway.
Oh, that's
So
fair.
they just like happen
yeah, okay.
to like they happen to like stumble upon it themselves.
Yeah.
But still got the same end result kind of thing. That's the I mean, the bringing Sala back into the mix adds a whole bunch of fun to
Oh my
the
God.
action of the final sequence.
No camels is such a great bit.
Yes.
That's 5 camels. Make up for my brother-in-law's car that we saw exploded, and the great like we're well out of range, and the car behind them blows up. Okay, and then it is great action. Like all of the sequences, the train chase that we got at the beginning was a fun way to kind of cap off that sequence that had a lot of fun moments within it of like the rhino sticking its head out, and the snakes, and the like the magician's trap box that like Indy ultimately escapes on. Just lots of fun in there, and I also love the decoy of setting the boat down the path. And if they had just waited a few more minutes, the Nazis would have thought they were going down there, but instead they just immediately bust out that crate, and you get a fun little motorcycle chase.
It's great.
It's fun.
Also, shout out to the to 3 of the Nazis being in synchronization, putting their goggles on, and one Nazi just being like 1 second too late for it.
Sure. Also, shout out to going back to your point of like Henry Jones is always disapproving. Just his look of disdain sitting in the sidecar of that motorcycle chase.
So good.
Which I thought about this recently, and then this movie like reinforced it. I'm like, whoever wants to be the person sitting in a motorcycle sidecar,
Especially during the chase.
that like. I probably saw like somebody on the freeway like driving the other day and thought of that and was like, what, like why would you ever want that experience? Cuz that just doesn't look fun. Like you're wildly out of control, and that is just not a thing I would want to be in. Lots of fun, just great action, great comedy and humor as has been touched on throughout. And at the end of the day, just a great adventure. I'm also a sucker for the 3 trials at the end. The penitent man, the name of God. In Latin, Jehovah starts with an I. Them both realizing it at the same moment. Loving that beat, and then the leap of faith moment, which I don't know realistically how that optical illusion works.
I thought it was great,
but it's obviously a lot of fun, and it's a fun visual reveal once the camera pans over to another angle or something like that, and you see how that is done potentially in camera.
I think too. I'm glad you brought the trials up at the end, because I think such a big theme that they reference a lot in this movie is this idea of belief, and what does Indy ultimately believe in is kind of bandied about a lot, right? We've seen him in multiple movies now talk about the fact that the mystical and the magical, the mumbo jumbo, I don't buy kind of thing, which he should, but he doesn't, so fair enough. But they kind of keep going, what do you believe in, right? What do you stand for them? What is your sort of thing you go for? And I love the fact that at the end we get this whole thing of him going through these trials and having to take this leap of faith and be what is your what do you believe in, right? And I love that this is a kind of a recurring theme throughout the movie, that Donovan just straight up point blank asks him, like, what do you believe in then, right? Like, what do you believe in?
He believes it belongs in a museum.
And right, like, and ultimately, like, Indy's, like, I think belief of just, like, in himself and in his dad and in just, like, what he's taught, right? Like, knowledge ultimately, I think, is like the bedrock of what Indiana Jones' belief system is, right? Like, that he's been passed down from his dad to himself, that he's learned, that he's using his dad's, you know, knowledge and advice. And I really, really liked it, right? And I think, you know, obviously there's a lot of great stuff in this movie. Action-wise, we didn't really touch on it as much as we should have, but like the entire tank chase sequence is incredible. It's just like this rolling, like 15-minute long sequence that like never stops basically, and is all like practically done, and like actual performances and stunt performers, and most of it's done by Indy or by Harrison Ford, and like Sean Connery and them all, and like it's just so brilliant. But like the way that they like weave in these like emotional themes throughout the movie, and this idea of like belief and who is Indiana Jones really, I think is great. And they literally ride off into the sunset. It's like the perfect ending to the movie. It's just perfect.
Also, shout out to the moment in the catacombs where they see the like imagery of the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh my god! Yes.
Indy calls out, "It's the Ark of the Covenant," and she's like, "How are you? Are you sure? Are you sure? Pretty sure.
Pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah." As a fun little another kind of callback and payoff. Absolutely. Like the riding off into the sunset is. I was definitely like, I was watching the movie the other night, and I'm like, did I miss the like we named the dog Indiana? I didn't realize that, like I didn't remember it being like it's the like end of the movie. So like I was just like, when does that happen? And then so finally like, let's go Junior, and then Sala being like, Junior, always Junior. What is that? And the reveal that Indiana was the name of the dog. We named the dog Indiana. Was a fun like little button for after you've had this heartfelt moment, you like then get this like, oh well, their relationship hasn't like fundamentally changed. They're still going to be sniping at one another, but then Marcus, you know, being like, haha, I know exactly where to go, and just immediately almost falling off the horse, kind of
lost in his own museum, you say, right? And then chase after, and then so good,
riding off into the sunset, as you said.
It's like, and it's beautiful too. Like that sunset they got.
Yeah. So crazy. If anything, I will point out there the weird like loophole bit of like, what happened to all the Nazis that were there? Like, because like they, especially like, I mean, also per the breakdown there, they didn't all fall in the hole and die. So they fled sooner and fled on cars and stuff.
Basically so there's like a small, like very quick cutaway, basically like when they all get back and like heal, Henry Jones Sr. basically, that like one of the guys at like Salam maybe like grabs the gun basically, points at him and goes like, drop your weapons. And they're all like, the guys who are left like all bolt, and then like, that's all you need to know. They're gone. The Nazis are gone. They escaped.
Yep.
Ran away on foot.
Anyway.
Shame they couldn't all die.
Indeed.
Indeed.
Well, that is going to do it for our favorite moments here. Let's dive into the report card. We grade from A+ to F. I'll kick us off, and I don't think I'll be alone in this. I give this one an A+. Again, it is my favorite of the Indiana Jones series, and just a great fun action. 2 hours that fly by, all told. Logan, how about you?
Yeah, it's an A++, right? I mean, Indiana Jones: Last Crusade is one of my very, very, very favorite movies of all time. I talked when we first went over this for Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? That like, you know, out of the big series that really matter to me of like James Bond, Star Wars, you know, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, whatever it might be, like this is the one that like me and my dad bonded over the most. The one that we watched the most, Last Crusade, it's the most father-son relationship one out of all of them, right? Like, it is very near and dear to my heart. It is so much of my love of Indiana Jones in this movie. I think it is absolutely spectacular. It's, 30 years since it came out, and I just love it more every time I see it. I find new things to enjoy from I see it. And so, it is an easy A+. For me. Last Crusade is my masterpiece.
There you go. Cameron, how about you?
Same? It's an A+. Like, it's just straight up solid. It's all the way through. Like, it's such a great adventure, to the point where I mentioned it, I think maybe before we started recording, I was a little later than I actually would have been, because I was like, I don't want to leave right like before the trials, because that's where I was at, and I was like, I just gotta finish this. And it was also, those trials seemed a lot longer when I was a kid. They were a lot like, I was a lot more scared, I guess, when I was watching it. Yeah, it's an absolute masterpiece of a film. I think that this tops everything that Indiana Jones was before. I think it sets a probably impossible to reach marker for what Indiana Jones should be going forward. And we'll find out more about that next week.
Indeed. One last thing that we touched on it a little bit, but I do love the Indiana Jones meeting the knight,
the Grail Knight,
the immortal, because he's been there for hundreds of years.
He's been drinking from the cup.
Yeah, but has lost all of his strength.
700 years is a long time.
Yeah. Loved that interaction and the realization that Indy would be a worthy protector. It also does beg the question of okay, well, if this only works in this place, how did that start in the first place? Because it's not like that's where the Last Supper happened or anything like that.
You can't take immortality with you. You can't live forever. But whatever you drank while you were there stays with you as you go forward.
But it's why does that? Why does it happen in that temple location? Why is it restricted to the Great Seal that is there?
Booby trap.
None of that is where the historical events would have happened.
Yeah, to me,
it's just weird.
I just assumed it was a magical booby trap.
Right. It's like that's where it was consecrated, right? And that's where it was God and the Knights established a thing, and so that's where the magic.
Yeah. Also, shout out when Indy can take the sword and kill the knight and just do that, but then he just puts it down by being I'm not actually shout out to him being.
We're not going to do trial by combat here, right? You're 700 years old. I liked it because, and it's a thing I never really appreciated before until these last two viewings, of just the fact that the Holy Grail is sort of a curse as much as a blessing, which sort of ties into the Ark of the Covenant and a lot of the gifts and mystical things of Indiana Jones, that you can live forever, but also you can't leave this temple, you can't have anyone else with you, and you'll live forever, but you'll lose your strength over time, right? It is not a reward. It is a thing you're sacrificing your life, or you're dedicating yourself to protect it, not to go party forever. And I like the fact they tie into that versus a lot of times when people do the Fountain of Youth or something like that, it is just yeah, you get it and then you fucking bounce. And this is there is a sort of this religious kind of sacrificial element to it that feels right to kind of what you'd expect for these kind of things. And I enjoyed that as well.
For the sake of immortality, right? But his brother ended up living a very, very long time that you reference.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I appreciated there the element of he was the last of the three knights that we had kind of been introduced to throughout the film, and the graves of those knights, and just Indy was not expecting to find the third one still there and kicking. But yeah, it's just a fun little kind of end moment in the film that we kind of we didn't really dive into, apart from the iconic because you chose poorly is one of those most iconic elements of this film.
Yeah, we've gone backwards now because Trevor sort of opened his can of worms after we reached. But to that note, the one final thing I'll say is that sequence in particular is my dad's favorite part of the movie, and I always the part he really loves is always just the fact that the Holy Grail isn't the shiny bright one. It is just it's a basic carpenter's cup, right? It'd be something that someone poor who probably made their own things would have, and it's
it's not even that. It's
a brilliant way that
it's the kind of place. Oh, sorry. Keep going. I apologize.
I was just gonna say it's such a brilliant way to be especially 2,000 years later, almost 2,000 years later when this happens, right? Everyone would just think, what is the cup of gods, right? The King of Kings would be what, and then in reality, it's but he, would have something really humble, and I always love that plot twist of Donovan gets tricked into it, but also which is really, oh yeah, this is definitely what he would have. And in reality, it's something way smaller, just tucked away in the back, right? Dirty, kind of got grunge to it look, and that's the actual one. Is such a clever thing as well.
Yeah,
it's the cup from a dinner. It's a cup from a
also
dinner.
That, right, yeah.
It's not even oh, this was
shared,
his
right?
cup. It was just happened to be the cup that was at his dinner, and then they also had on them when they caught his blood. Like, it's a very specific thing that was just like, it's just a cup. It wasn't meant to be something special to the people who were doing it, because it wasn't like, it didn't occur to them that this would be a sanctified object by the blood of Christ. Like, that just wouldn't hit them.
Yeah.
And so the idea that also, like, it gives you eternal life. Why? But like the whole point of it is like, it's on consecrated ground, all of that stuff. But I love the idea that it's like the blessings go with you no matter what. But the price of immortality, the price to live forever, is to remain there in vigil. Also, I love that he's in a traditional vigil, traditional nightly vigil when Indy stumbles upon him.
Breaks in,
it is one of those that, like, as I've grown older, I look at that scene, I'm like, well, like, yeah, if Donovan wasn't so blinded by greed, that's a very easy riddle to get over, because it's going to be the one thing that looks significantly different than all of the jewels and gems. And also, there's like just plates. There's just straight up plates there among all of the cups. And it's like, are you trying to say that that's the Grail? No, of course that plate is not the Grail.
A knight's gotta eat, even when he's 72 years old.
But
he's gotta have some
it's like plates that are like up on display. It's not like, just sitting on it. It is like, it's the good china kind of thing. It's like, that's not the Grail. That plate is clearly not the Grail. It's you would like it. If you're given that like last riddle of like what is the cup of Christ? It's like, well, let me look around. A lot of these just look like gaudy jeweled things. Hey, that one doesn't look like that. It's probably that one. It's probably the one odd thing out.
Also, it's probably loot from the Crusade, so it's already not great.
Yeah.
I also I like it too, because like, it's not even necessarily a riddle, right? Like, the expectation would be that like you would sort of just know that anyway, right? And then like Donovan bursts in, like you said, in the night, just sort of says like, grab the cup, right? Like, one, it'll give you life, the other one will, kill you, right? Basically, but like, it's not necessarily presented as a riddle. It's just sort of like Donovan has to pick the right cup, and like, it's sort of presumed you would know it.
Well, he doesn't even pick the cup,
because the knight has no idea how long he's been there for, right? He's not just sort of just like, yeah, like, it's been a while. And so like, I like this idea too, just like, it's sort of meant to be an easy riddle, because you shouldn't be tripped up by it if you're actually like,
if you made it through the other trials here, this should be
you should know this, right?
But that's kind of the point, is that Donovan isn't an archaeologist.
Exactly.
He's not.
What did
you say? 70% of all archaeology is done in a library.
Yep.
This guy is never somebody who's stepped foot into a library if he didn't have to. Like, this guy, he bought his way into his collection,
into everything, right?
Yeah, it's all about this. Like you can make comparisons to other things that obviously wasn't the intention when they made it, but the idea that this ostentatiousness, this idea of like, he's hosting a dinner party and he sends his goons to go pick up Indiana Jones. Like, it's he is a absolute shitbag.
Indeed. Speaking of absolute shitbags, actually, it's not our segment here, but we'll get to that segment. Our first segment here, it belongs in a museum. Best artifacts. We have 2 new artifacts for this one that I'm counting. I'm counting the Cross of Coronado, as well as the Holy Grail. So our ranking thus far: number 1, Ark of the Covenant; number 2, Sankara stones. Where do you guys want to put the Cross of Coronado?
I'd probably put it under Sankara stones. We don't get a lot with it. It's more sentimental than it is an actual like cool artifact.
That's why I put it above Sankara stones,
really?
Personally.
I
think it is it is such a personal quest.
That emotional, yeah.
It's also the only one over the course of the series that he successfully retrieves.
That's fair.
and like gets back and is
I suppose
able
it should be number 1 then, because it does end up in a museum.
It does make its way to a museum.
Yeah, I agree for Trevor, right? Because like, we see in the flashback, it's 1912 and we go to 1938. So for 26 years, he's been chasing it for like that reason alone. Like, and because it is like literally like the genesis of his like arc as Indiana Jones. Yeah, I'd put it above the Sankara stones.
Yeah. And then Holy Grail, do we want to put that above Ark of the Covenant?
For me, it's number 1, right?
It's not number 1 for me. I think Ark of the Covenant's still number 1. There's something about like the majesty of the Ark that is like this otherworldly, like it has a sense of otherworldliness to it that is like the idea that this is a dangerous thing, that this is something that should not be handled. They shouldn't be recording, like, it's not supposed to be some Nazi movie reel type thing. It's special for a very important reason, and it was hidden away for a very important reason and lost for a very important reason. But I think that the Holy Grail is like a second, like a really close second. But I guess it's up to you, Trevor.
Yeah,
all of Cameron's reasons he say for that are the exact reasons I would say for the Holy Grail, basically. But
like,
that's fair.
All of the things you just said about the like the Grail literally falls into a chasm to stay hidden in this one.
It applies to both. I think all of the reasons apply to both, but I think they are truly great artifacts. But there's something about the Ark of the Covenant that to me is very particular.
For me, the only defense I'll give for the Holy Grail, I guess, because Trevor's the tiebreak here, is that like I think all that's exactly the same for the Holy Grail, and like how like I think obviously like religiously symbolic the Holy Grail is and just kind of what it entails, but also like I find the Holy Grail fascinating because it is like the only real one that like sort of tempts Indy, even if just for a second, right? Like when he's just hanging from like the thing and like he's almost the one to just die for it, right? Like it is almost like this like almost like the ring from Lord of the Rings, right? Like it can sort of like turn you even if you don't mean it to, right? Like the temptation for like what this is. I like found that really interesting too. Like it is sort of the one thing that like sort of gets him to maybe stray even for a moment in the series. And just like the symbolic impact of like him and his dad's relationship with the Grail. No bad answer though.
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna go ahead and put the Holy Grail above Ark of the Covenant, in part because I think like obviously both points have been made for a lot of these things, and the one I will add is we see the healing power of the Grail here, which I think is like a good and miraculous kind of gift, and we see the destructive power of the Ark of the Covenant, but like the Ark of the Covenant, if we knew that it was only going to strike down baddies like Nazis, great. But the fact that like Indy and Marion have to very specifically like avert their gaze, or it would have killed them too, it suggests that it is an uncaring. It is very much a like Old Testament God.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, dude, let me tell you about the story of the guy who decided that when it was like shaking to steady it, he dropped dead then and there.
Yeah.
Because you do not touch the Ark. That's the point of the rods. That's the point of everything. Like that's one of the reasons I love it so much. Also, is like it is like this very much like a, hey, here's a list of rules you can and cannot do with the Ark. When it's opened, you can't look inside of it. And Indy's like, we can't look inside of it, Marion. And she's like, but why? He goes, just trust me. We don't want to look inside of it. God put these rules for a reason.
Yeah. So moving on to most punchable Nazis at all, because obviously we have
Adolf Hitler goes to the top of the list.
Yes, Adolf Hitler obviously is number one. But yeah, our list is basically doubling because we have Vogel, Elsa, Walter Donovan, and Adolf Hitler. Yes, obviously.
If we're counting Hitler, that's an easy one, right?
Hitler is our easy number one. Because of course
you can put like 8 spaces after his name too. We have a lot.
Kind of the reverse Willie Scott.
99.
So then we have Belloc, Todt, Molaram, and rounding out the list currently Dieter. So let's go with Vogel first. Vogel is largely like the Dieter and Todt of this film, but combined into one. And I think probably has just more to do.
Yeah. I like Vogel more than both of those, I would say.
Yeah. Do we want to put him above Belloc or below Belloc?
Below Belloc, for sure.
Okay.
I'm okay with below Belloc. Okay. He's easily the best Nazi, like...
strongman.
Like stooge. Right, yeah, right.
Yeah. Then we have Elsa. Elsa, an interesting wrinkle in this mix as a archetype that we've not yet seen.
I think I like Elsa more than Belloc because of like how close she's able to get to Indy, right? And like how she's able to kind of peel back his armor a little bit. And is sort of like Belloc obviously in Raiders famously says that like he's sort of like the other side of the coin of Indiana Jones. But I feel that almost even more strongly with Elsa, right? Like she's just sort of the other side of that coin, right? Like, and the fact that that's almost literally shown by the fact that they are both put in the same situation and are both tempted in the same way. And then it's Indy's like love of his dad and listening to his dad that kind of brings him out, whereas Elsa doesn't have that love. She's got just like this overwhelming like ambition that and like thirst for power that sims her down. But like I like Elsa as like a reflection of Indy a lot.
I think Elsa is above Belloc for me. She is the same kind of evil as Belloc. That is, you should know better, but you don't care. Like, you know better. It's not even that you should know better. You know better.
You do know
you
better.
know better. And you're choosing to support baddies for your own personal gain. Like, and it's not just the baddies, it's the baddest of the baddies. Like, I almost want to put Elsa above Adolf Hitler for that reason. Like, you know what this can do, and you're willing to go along with it because then you means you found the grail.
Yeah.
And I hate that. That's one of the, like, in a real life reflection, I hate that about people that I know and who I care about and who I love, who I know make decisions to support certain popular individuals that are going to end up like hurting me or hurting people I care about. Or are bad, they know are bad, but choose it because it benefits them in some way. It's despicable and I hate it. And I would also, moving that on to Donovan, I would put Donovan, Donovan's an equal to Belloc in my opinion.
I can see that too.
Because they're both that same character basically. Actually, you know what? I'd say Belloc is better than Donovan because Donovan doesn't even go to the library himself. Donovan sucks.
Belloc just gets more from me too than Donovan. But I'd have Elsa above Belloc, Donovan right below.
I get Belloc's obsession with the arc and like doing that for that purpose. Donovan like straight up says, I'm going to become immortal so that I can outlive the Nazis.
Yeah.
I don't care what the Nazis do during their time. They're going to be the darkness on Earth, but I'll survive, so I don't care. That's what makes him worse.
Yeah. I'm pretty much in agreement. So we have Adolf Hitler at number 1 by a mile, followed by Elsa at number 2, Belloc at number 3, Walter Donovan at number 4, Vogel at number 5, and then down to Todt, Malaram, and Dieter 6, 7, and 8.
I will just say, as like a final pin on this, as another like ribbon in its hat, the fact that Last Crusade had 3 villains, well, if you want to count Hitler formula, but 3 real villains, and they're basically, 3 of the top 4 spots on this list is like how great of a movie this is. Like how like all these villains get their own moments to really shine.
Best sidekicks going into this. This
is gonna be,
Short Round at number
1,
Marion at number 2, Sala at number 3, and Marcus Brody at number 4, and then way down at number 99, Willie Scott. So
congratulations, Willie Scott. I don't think you're the worst.
Yeah, we have some updates and new entries here. Obviously, we have Professor Henry Jones. Elsa serves as a sidekick for at least part of the movie, so I'm including her in the mix here. And then we have more time with Marcus and Sala, so we can basically update their rankings if appropriate. So
who do you want to start with?
Let's start with kind of the people who are already on the list first. Sala and Marcus Brody. Do we move them around because of their added function in this film as well?
I think Brody for sure for me.
I think Brody goes above Sala here, but I don't think he goes above Marion.
I think Brody goes above Marion for me. I mean, again, the list is sort of funky because I was like the outlier last week where like I had Marion above Short Round. And so it's a little bit different for me, but like I really like, I think Brody is the best like comedic sidekick of the Indy series, right? Like I think, and like here in particular, he gets so much more time to really like be that role, and I think he has a lot of fun with it, right? And like
the pen is mightier.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Even like his and like Indy's dad's like secret handshake they have when that's in the tank is like such a great little bit. Like he has this like paternal, like almost like the kooky uncle relationship with Indy that I really love, and we get so much more of that fleshed out here. And like I really love Marion, and I really love Short Round too. But like I just think that Brody gets so much fun moments with both Indy and also Henry Sr. that like for me, I would raise him certainly above Salah, even probably above Marion for me. And as much as I love Salah here, he's just gonna have to kind of suffer because Brody just goes up.
Yeah,
so I would raise Brody 2 spots. But
I'm good with that. So we'll put Marcus Brody at number 2. Obviously, Marion will get another crack next week too.
That's true.
So that might bump her back up above Brody. Does Salah move up again above Marion in this one, or
No,
stay where?
I think
For me,
Salah-
no, yeah.
I think Salah stays where he is.
Okay.
Salah's
he's like the opposite of Brody.
consistent,
He
he's
gets
great, we
less.
love Salah,
Yeah.
but he does not move
Yeah.
up.
Yeah,
right.
he gets less than Raiders, so he stays the same.
Then where in the mix do we want to throw Professor Henry Jones?
So this is for me. He's number 1. For me, he's one in a shot, right? Like he tops everyone else.
I think that for me, the question of what makes the best sidekick is what do they bring out of the hero?
Yeah.
And I think that you're asking two opposite sides of it. Like, Short Round brings out a paternal aspect of Jones that I love. And Henry brings out an aspect of, like, the son that is seeking validation and everything. And the question is, like, which do you prefer more? And I don't know if what it is. I like them pretty close to the same, but there's something about this most recent watch of it and seeing that paternal aspect of Jones in Temple of Doom that I put Short Round above Henry by just like a nose.
For me, it is an element of I think Indy and Short Round's relationship is the best part of Temple of Doom. I just think that a lot of the things we love about that are small things, and it's not like, whereas like Henry, where the two Henry's relationship is like the anchor of this entire movie. Like, there's way more given to that relationship in this one than it is ever in Short Round and Indiana Jones, because they're doing a way angrier movie in that one. And he has to kind of split time with Willie Scott, whereas like this one, like, it is pretty clearly the two Joneses here.
Yeah.
And like, no disrespect to the actors involved, but like, Sean Connery is not a 9-year-old, right? It's like he's Sean Connery. Like, that's part of what makes this movie great too, is the fact that like when we were going through the cast, I almost said at the end of like, you have Harrison Ford, who's maybe the greatest action star ever, and then it's like, well, right before him you have Sean Connery, who's maybe the best, like, you know, most famous movie star ever, right? So it's like, it's this great, I think, pairing of like two guys who could very easily overshadow one another just from like an acting perspective, right? And the fact that they do, I think, blend together so well, right, and mesh so well, that relationship to me is like the heart of the movie. So I have them above, but Short Round's also great.
Yeah, I'm gonna lean towards Henry Jones taking the number 1 spot as well.
No
I
bad
think
answers.
Connery brings a lot of fun to the role, and
absolutely.
the dynamic between the two Jones boys is fun throughout. As much as I love Ke Huy Quan, I hate so much of Temple of Doom that like, while Short Round is the best part, right? He's also suffers because he's in a much worse movie.
I think that's totally fair. Like I said, I really saw it more as that's what I got this time around watching them. I think Henry Jones, if you want to put it on paper, like, is definitely leagues above Short Round. But I said,
also
this last time really did something for me with Short Round.
It's also interesting too, because watching Temple of Doom now, I would say for anyone, but certainly for the three of us, it's impossible not to view it through the lens of like what has happened in the ensuing 40 years and the impact of like Everything Ever All at Once, right? And like how it sort of reshaped our relationship with these actors in a way that wasn't necessarily there even 2 years ago if we'd done this podcast too, right? Versus
it's fair.
You know, I mean, and again, I would admit that Sean Connery is my favorite actor of all time. So like, I'm also just incredibly biased in this selection, but like, you know,
I don't
it's
think
interesting how the arc of these relationships change as like they do stuff after the fact as well.
Yeah, I just don't think there's a wrong answer for who you could have as number one. I think it's just like I'm sure in like a year or two I'll put Sean Connery above Short Round.
Honestly, I think out of like Marion, Henry Jones Sr. or Short Round are all totally respectable answers for the top spot.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly, where we want to throw Elsa into the mix here.
Number 100. She's a Nazi.
I still would rather spend time with her than Willie Scott. Which,
yeah, it's interesting. Like, so
I got a no Nazi policy.
That's
so
fine.
It's a totally.
I'll put her
fair
at 98, but Willie Scott not a Nazi, but like, I mean, we don't know. She could have turned into a Nazi.
That's a fair point.
True.
She could have gone pro-Nazi. We don't know.
Yeah, so it's interesting for me because, like, I wouldn't have Elsa on the sidekick list, right? But we're including her on the list. It makes it complicated, right? Like, I think she's a better... She gives better answers than Ridley Scott, for sure. She's ultimately a villain, so we probably can't technically rank her above Ridley Scott, I guess. But, like,
Trevor seems okay with it.
I like Elsa as a character more than I like Ridley Scott as a character. So however that needs to break out, I'll have it break out. Trevor's going to be the tie break, so he can do whatever he wants.
All right, Elsa's going in at 98, above Willie Scott, who is just the worst.
Above every other cast person in the film.
Indeed.
And again, I just want to repeat it yet again. This is no disrespect to Kate Capshaw. She's a totally fine actress. She was given absolutely nothing to work with.
It wasn't that she wasn't given nothing.
Role.
She was given the worst to work with.
Yeah, she was given...
They literally told her, be
actively
the worst person you can be.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they literally told her that, but
In a way.
that's not how the word literally works. Cameron and I will not
Technically
let you
it is.
pull that
Technically
shit.
it is.
That's fair.
Literally can mean figuratively.
No, fuck that noise.
It's in the
Potentially.
dictionary, yeah.
I'll use potentially. Potentially, they told her she's the
don't-
worst.
Potentially.
I don't
be
ascribe to that, like, Webster's changing the definition of literally because fucking morons change the definition of literally mentality here.
Words only are what we consensually all agree they are.
Yeah.
So,
That's true.
Indiana Jones rankings. Number 1, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
think,
Number 2,
yeah.
Temple of Doom. It sounds like Last Crusade comes in at
right,
number
yeah.
1 for all three of us. So
Which
that's
I was
an
very
easy-
happy to hear. Yeah, love it.
Easy adjustment there. All right. Then we will be back next week with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And then the week after that, we've got Dial of Destiny in theaters.
I'm very excited for our Crystal Skull competition. Like, I was most looking forward to this one because I love to talk about Last Crusade, as we've done for 2 hours here, clearly. And we all love to talk about it, clearly, which is very exciting for me. But, like, Crystal Skull is, I think, going to be the most, like, interesting one to, like, look back at again, especially for you two. I don't think have seen it since it probably came out.
Nope.
Well, I've watched it a couple times.
I have
since-
not. I've seen it
so yeah,
once,
I'll
and
be
that was
very
enough at the
curious.
time, and we are going back.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull might be the movie I've seen the second most possibly out of the series.
Right.
Maybe Raiders more than it, but I've seen Last Crusade a lot. But then Raiders and I've seen Crystal Skull a lot of times in that movie theater. So it's close.
Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. Unsurprisingly, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Check it
Temple of
out.
Doom,
Check it out.
The Adventures
Don't
of
need to.
Young Indiana Jones, Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. I still am curious why they go with that one. Like, part of me was like, maybe they're doing it
'cause they listen to the
alphabetically.
podcast.
And then I was like, no, Curse of the Black Pearl is first alphabetically. So it's just weird that they jump straight
Is
to
it-
Pirates 2.
Do they count it as like maybe like the curse, and so like the party's maybe knocking it out alphabetically?
Nope.
Maybe.
I don't know. Who cares?
Yeah. National Treasure.
I'm sorry. I gotta really pee, guys.
And National Treasure, Edge of History. Extracurriculars. Anything else? Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus? No.
No.
We're all
think
just
so.
focused on this right now. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you for joining me. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Loggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
I would give a shout out to the Let's Plays that we have going live. It seems like every other day at this point for That Nerdy Site on YouTube.com/That Nerdy Site. You should go check them out. Trevor's doing stuff for Tears of the Kingdom. I always have to get the name right for Breath of the Wild. And then there's a whole bunch, they're currently on a pause, of Let's Plays for Cameron and Trevor going through Elden Ring. And then you can also see Cameron's Let's Plays of Jedi Fallen Order is the first one. Thank you. I always get those mixed up as well. As well as lots of other Let's Plays we've done in the past. You can go check out me and Trevor doing A Way Out. You can go check out me and Trevor playing the other game where we're tiny people, we get shrunk down to
It
size.
takes two.
Also made by the people. Thank you.
I was
You
gonna
can
say,
go
we
check out.
We didn't do A Way Out. That was you back at Irrational
Yeah, that was
Passions.
actually Rational Passions, bud.
Yeah. Rest in peace. You can go check out me and Trevor doing the other game that came out after A Way Out. Then you can go check out all the other Let's Plays we have. YouTube channel is great. Lots of stuff there. Lots of good content. So go check all of those out is what I'll say.
Cool. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's, 2 T's. What do you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
My shout out's going to go ahead and go out to our That Nerdy Site show. We just had
We love
a a blast doing another spoiler cast. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of stuff, and it looks like we're probably going to be doing another spoiler cast pretty soon. So.
Indeed, lots of spoiler casts. Basically, whatever been doing this week. This last week was our Tears of the Kingdom spoiler cast, as Cameron and I had finally both finished that game. So yes, you follow me at Trevor J Starkey. You guys already shouted out everything, so I will shout out all of the other That D Plus Show episodes. If you're just jumping in on this one, we've been doing Indiana Jones all month, so go check out those other episodes. We'll be back with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull next week, and then I imagine we're gonna probably maybe hop into like a Spider-Man or the new Avatar is now on Disney Plus as well. So maybe
probably not that one.
All right. Well, when you guys aren't feeling like doing stuff, I'll sit down and finally watch the Avatars, because I imagine those will probably get at least some views. Probably. Given that both movies made $2 billion. Well, that is going to do it for this episode. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest. Oh, I'll give another shout out. I did do a couple of extra Final Fantasy 16 demos that came out this week. So you can go catch those on the YouTube channel as well. youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other. Class dismissed. Da 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 da.